You're listening to the School Growth Strategies podcast, brought to you by Hubly. In this show, John O'Landon draws on his vast experience and expertise to deliver actionable advice to private school administrators who are ready to take the next steps toward running a more efficient and sustainable private school business. I'm your host, Ryan Cowden, and this week we're joined once again by John O'Landon. In this episode of the School Growth Strategies podcast, John and I discuss some cutting-edge communication techniques that can boost the retention rate of your school. On this podcast, we talk a lot about what educators and administrators can learn from marketers. Marketers utilize several strategies to find and attract potential new customers to companies. Many of these strategies rely on using new forms of technology to communicate with potential customers. A lot of those same strategies can also be used for retaining customers. By understanding the tools at our disposal and the communication habits of the people we are trying to reach, we can drastically improve the communication that exists between schools and families. A more relevant and engaging communication style will energize the families who already believe in your school and encourage them to continue their commitment with you. On this episode, you'll hear the importance of school-parent communication. Better communication efforts will share the amazing things happening in your school, bridge the generation gap with younger families, and keep parents informed and engaged in the life of the school. Next, we'll cover the role social networking sites like Facebook can play in these efforts. Facebook pages and groups for your already committed families are free ways to foster an engaging dialogue with your school community. Then we'll share some additional tools that will improve your communication techniques. Newsletter tools, blogs, and texts are all potential communication channels that are dynamic and relevant to the families you are trying to reach. Finally, we'll discuss ways to improve your communication by reducing what you send out. Gone are the days of sending a massive school newsletter to everyone in the school. Instead, using technology tools and systems will allow you to send relevant information straight to the people who need it. If you are looking for new ways to improve how you communicate with your committed families, then this is one episode you won't want to miss. There's a lot of actionable advice in this episode, so grab something to write with because you're going to want to take notes. As always, I'll be back on the other side to wrap up any loose ends. So, without any further ado, here's my conversation with John O'Landon. All right, Jono, welcome back to the podcast. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise.
Thanks. We are talking today about increasing your school's retention rate, and I kind of thought that an interesting place to start talking would be just kind of focusing on that communication piece. In your opinion, what does effective communication look like?
So obviously communication is like a really broad term, and it means so many things. And so in regards to retention, it's something I talk a lot about with school leaders is try to bridge the gap between a school and a business, because a school is a business, but at the same time, it's really not. It's not your regular kind of business. It's a school, and the focus as it should be is on the kids. And but when you're and that just obviously goes without saying. But when you're a private school, you're independent, and you're obviously running based off tuition. It's really different than a public school, right? So, So private schools, while they there's a lot of not for profit, independent schools, and then there's also a lot of for profit schools, but they both have to, they both have to make sure that they're communicating really effectively with their parents, which are their customers, right? Those are the paying customers, and so it really comes down to marketing, like retention of students. First and foremost, it comes from having a great school. That's for sure.
Okay.
What I mean? At the same time, it's really challenging for parents. It's really challenging for schools to be showing the parents the amazing things that are going on in their classrooms, because communication, and this is a challenge that exists even before the school even finds the parents, right? Like the gap between the people running the school, they're their knowledge of marketing, communications, and marketing tools, and even just their expectations of those things. Because generally, the average leader of a school is on average around 49, 50 years old,
Mm.
but the parents are of a much younger demographic,
Yeah.
right? So, um, and all the more so where parent communication is so vital is much more focused on the earlier years, right?
Hmm.
That's where parents and schools have to do a lot of communicating, because you can't rely on the teenagers also aren't great at you know bringing information back to parents a lot of times. But in high schools, it's more about how the school's communicating directly with the student. Parents are all very involved in high school, but it's absolutely critical and essential when you're talking about infants through pre-K through 8.
Sure.
Um, so so retention really comes down to keeping parents informed of the great things that are going on and keeping them happy and keeping them engaged. So
Okay.
parent engagement, is like that's like the holy grail. And
Hmm.
so in any school, public or private, parent engagement is has like really it's really essential, and it has. I mean, there's tons of research that shows how parent engagement promotes better outcomes. I mean,
Yeah.
good parent engagement promotes better outcomes for the students, um, and that's across all the whole education sector. But with private schools, it also means like retention and happy parents and happy customers too. And
Right.
again, that's how they keep the school funded, and and keep it functioning. And so it all comes down to communication and so retention. So ultimately, whenever a business is communicating with a customer, that's marketing, whether
Hmm.
they're a prospective customer or an
Yeah.
existing customer or a lost customer. It's all marketing, right?
Right.
So but how they do that is different. So how you want to use the communication tools and your strategies for uh, for growing your enrollment is different than retaining your enrollment. And
Okay.
you might use the same tools, but
Mm.
how you use them is different, and what you're doing with them strategically is different.
Sure.
So, as an example, a lot of times, you know, when it comes to growing enrollment, really, like just to take as one tool, for example, Facebook, right? So,
Yeah.
Facebook ads, I believe, there's a lot of data and a lot of reasons to say that it's the best place to advertise your school is Facebook advertising.
Hmm.
Um, but uh, I wouldn't use ads to retain parents. That would be weird, right? You don't need to
Yeah.
pay, you know. Um, but Facebook's free tools, like their pages or their groups, the private groups, are great tools for retaining parents. You know,
Mm.
and this is a common mistake that a lot of schools are making. Unfortunately, is that they'll use the Facebook their page as a way to advertise to new parents.
Mm.
And unfortunately, they have like just posting things on your Facebook page has essentially zero enrollment growth value, but it actually has really high enrollment retention value.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
how you use Facebook, depending on what where you are in the life cycle of your parent customer, is really going to be different and very strategically different.
Okay. Yeah. When you were talking about the age gap in terms of the communication, I was picturing, even when I was in the classroom, you'd send pieces of paper home with kids, and you hoped that the
Yeah,
kids remembered to show it to their parents, and
right.
social media allows for you to go directly to the parents, right, on these
Yeah.
pages and in these groups.
Yeah, there's many tools you can use, and you want to be very careful though how you use them. I hope the background noise isn't too bad. So bear with me. I am
Okay.
stuck outside.
Sure.
It's a wonderful day, um, but there is some construction going on not too far from me.
Okay.
So
Okay.
hopefully my very expensive headset here will.
Yeah, your voice
Uh,
sounds good. Yeah.
okay, good.
Yeah.
In any event, um, so so all the tools you would use to market, like a newsletter tool or a blog or even text messages or Facebook. again, there's different ways that you want to use them to retain parents. So one of the again, so parent communication is like super super critical.
Yeah.
Schools on average spend an insane amount of money on managing parent communication. So per 100 students, the average, sorry, let me, got my metrics wrong here.
Okay.
No, that was right. Per 100 students, a school spends on average, and it's going to blow your mind, $36,000 a month
Oh, wow.
managing parent communication. How is that possible?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So so when you calculate the hours of their staff,
Hmm.
that staff spend, the time that staff spend, so per 100 students. So every time I say this, people are like, "That's insane." It can be, but when we walk through all the different ways that the teachers, the administrators, are how they all the different parent communication uh, responsibilities they have, and you could, and I'm gonna so communication is broad. Within that, I'm gonna say even, you know, getting information from parents, which
Hmm.
oftentimes happens by way of like paper forms, things like that. So managing that communication, it's not just outbound communication, it's also inbound. Schools have to collect information from
Hmm.
parents too, right?
Right.
Managing that communication, it is so time consuming when you don't have an efficient process or efficient system, right? So
Yeah.
when you look at, so I've surveyed, personally interviewed thousands of schools at this point, and and on average, schools are managing 20 different communication tools
Hmm.
per school. And now you see the same tools being used across the board, and but almost every marketing communication tool you name, like just the obvious ones: Facebook, Twitter, Google, Google Groups, um, Shutterfly, like
Yeah.
all these, like, I mean, I see everything, and I mean, and of course the standard, sticky notes stuffed in backpacks,
Yeah.
paper, calendars. I mean, there's
Hmm.
calendars galore. Schools are managing like 10 different calendars, right? And
Yeah.
they're trying to get all this information, um, organized into different groups because there's obviously different classes and programs and age levels, and and then they generally, this becomes impossible, but ideally you would just send every parent only 100% relevant information to every parent, but that becomes really challenging when there's all these different groups. So there's program based communication, age class based communication, program based, activity based communication, specific child based communication. And
Hmm.
so you actually need to have a system that makes it easy and filters information to the right parents at the right time, per activity, per group, per age, per class, per child,
Yeah.
actually takes quite a lot of complexity.
Right.
So to set up a system with, tools that either free or paid tools that you're going to cobble together into a patchwork, that takes a pretty sophisticated IT professional. And let's be frank, the IT professionals that work at schools are usually not, necessarily coming from an IT background. Or
Right.
if they are, they weren't like sort of top of the class from Stanford or MIT. These are
Hmm.
okay. I mean, because those guys don't work at a small district or So usually the people that are IT at schools oftentimes volunteer into it, or just happen to be somebody in the office that knows how to
Hmm.
use Word or something, and they're not really IT experts. Okay, so
Right.
they end up cobbling together these haphazard communication structures, which end up, unfortunately, more more or less training the parents to ignore them. Because what happens is parents, and this is the common mistake. As an example, like a newsletter, right? Every
Hmm.
parent knows the weekly newsletter that has everything that's going on in the school for every program and every child, right? And that's the newsletter that nobody reads.
Right.
Not because they don't want to,
Hmm.
but because, like, parents are ever more busy, right? Both parents are working now. Everyone's running around. You get an email that's like, as long as your arm, and there's like you're trying to scour it for like the 5% of the information that's relevant to you as a parent.
Yeah.
It's not like any parent's like, well, I don't like this. I'm going to purposely ignore this. That's not the case. It's just like, oh, that's a really long email. Guess what? I'm going to check that out a little later. Then it gets
Yeah.
piled under a million other emails, and then it just like parents just don't know what's going on, and then that causes even more work for the people running the school, right?
Hmm.
So when because there's a lot of information that the school has to make sure the parent knows is informed
Mm-hmm.
of, because like if not, I mean, there could be liabilities and like big issues and just upset parents, and I didn't see this, how come I didn't know? And then, every school director, principal has, or anyone in the office has had that conversation repeatedly, right?
Right.
So it's a vicious cycle, actually. It's like, and so obviously you can hear I'm passionate about this. I've been talking about this. I've been digging into this problem for literally like 5 or 6 years now.
Wow.
And it's like so in regards to retention, if you have a communication process which is make sure ideally that parents are just getting 100% relevant information whenever they get the information. That alone, you can
Yeah.
hit a parent 10 times a day if it's a bite-sized Twitter-sized message, right? SMS text type of message
Hmm.
that they can consume quickly, because that's how we're communicating all the time anyways. Notifications, pings all over the place. But as long as it's, if it's about their child and it's just relevant to them and it's small and digestible, you can pelt parents with that all day long. That's
Okay.
okay, you know. Um, but what doesn't work is repetitive, like long form communication of everything that's going on with everyone's child, repeatedly, because this it's so hard for a school on their own to figure out how to filter the communication out to the right parents all
Yeah.
the time. They end up just kind of duplicating and triplicating their efforts to push that sort of fire hose of information
Yeah.
in the parent's face repeatedly, which just again trains the parents to ignore it. It's like it's
Yeah.
not, it's because it's like a painful experience, and you avoid painful experiences. Like think of any other business. Like what business would keep their customers if they had to, if they were just shoving a bunch of irrelevant information down the throats of their other customers? Like
Yeah.
they would lose their customers. They would just
Right.
like think of a bank, or like if you were to go to a bank and they were to say, here's what's going on with everyone else's accounts.
Yeah. Right. Every
Like,
day.
right. It's
That
like,
makes.
hmm, yeah, that doesn't affect me. It's like,
Right.
so, but the funny thing is, parents go through this labor and this effort, and still, because they have to. So it's funny. That's how schools are not regular businesses. Their customers
Mm-hmm.
have to be informed, and like they're paying for a private school. They're paying on average $10,000 to
Yeah.
be slapped in the face with all this irrelevant information, and they keep on paying it year after year because there's just not a better system. But if you can, if you can improve that communication experience, right? So again, obviously, the baseline way to keep a good retention is to have a great program with wonderful teachers. That's the baseline, right? Because parents see
Hmm.
what's going on with their children, and that's the most important thing, of course.
Yeah.
But then there's a percentage of parents, customer happiness, that you have the ability to sort of increase and incrementally improve your retention rate that way.
Yeah.
So that's retention on communication level.
Okay.
um, and also, really important in regards to retention is through your marketing when they're not yet customers, when they're prospective families.
Yeah.
um, you need a good marketing system, so you're in a position to be very selective,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then you're able to make sure that you're getting the best fit for your school, because most schools today are at 60% capacity,
Hmm.
and they're feeling their back is up against the wall, and they're feeling the pressure, like, how am I going to keep the school running? Am I going to have to lay people off? Am I going to have to, if I own the school, am I going to have to volunteer work at, am I going to have to like take a pay cut and not bring home a salary for myself again this year? That type of thing. These are the conversations I have every day.
Okay.
And so having a good marketing system that puts you in a position to not just be full, but be full with the families that best fit your school's philosophies, out
Right.
culture, whatever it is.
Sure.
Um, is the best way to work on retention,
Okay.
because when you get those parents that aren't a good fit, and every school has had this experience, those are the parents that make everybody work way harder,
Yeah.
cause a lot of stress, and then they leave in a year, and then they usually take a few other families with them when they go because they've soured the pot and created problems and brought other parents into this, things like that. So
Right.
it's yeah, that like so it really all comes down to communication, because
Yeah.
marketing on the front end is communication, retention is communication. So it's super critical. It is a super critical. I mean, it's not as important as just making sure that you've got a great education program and you got the best teachers possible and the best environment. All of that stuff is that's the actual product. That's the actual reason why everybody's there and the parents are there in the first place. So that's
Mhm.
got to be great. But sometimes, no matter how amazing it's going on inside, if parents aren't, if that is not being, well, again, they're going to watch their children grow and see what's happening. That's one form of communicating that to parents, but you don't want to rely on that exclusively. You want to help that along. you know
Yeah.
you want to make sure parents are aware in a way that they can ingest, happily, what amazing things are going on in the classroom.
Right. So when you talk about, you don't have to send everything out to the whole school. What are some niches that you could kind of filter down to? Are you thinking like grade level or individual classrooms, or like what are some of those
Yeah,
subgroups that you're thinking about?
yeah. So ideally you want a system that you know uh, automates the process of sending information,
Okay.
filtering information automatically. So one example is like just calendar events. You know, um, so it's good to have a calendar system that doesn't require you to manually manage a bunch of different calendars for every different classroom or what have you.
Hmm.
It's so a good system will allow you to assign events to certain grades or multiple kinds of groups. So it really just comes down to groups.
Okay.
There's groups, right? There's
Yeah.
an architecture of groups, and then there's also child specific. You know,
Hmm.
so like a reporting system or a documentation system um, could be based off a class or
Hmm.
so there's a few different uh, ways of organizing the children, right? There could be a specific room, but there might be multiple age. So in a Montessori environment, as an example, they'll have a room with from three to 6 year olds,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So or one, um, those are different age levels. So sometimes there'll be communication for a specific age level within that room,
Okay.
but sometimes it's room
Mhm.
specific.
Yeah.
You know, so or there might be a certain a certain enrichment program, like music or
Yeah.
dance or art or something that's only certain kids sign up for it. So
Hmm.
communications for that program should be specific.
Okay.
you know and
Yeah.
then there's other kinds of groups in the school too. There's staff, and there's alumni, and there's a board. You know what I mean? So you want a
Right.
system that makes it
Right.
easy to communicate with groups, like create groups easily. Obviously, the most important grouping is like the program specific group. So you want something that kind of just snaps everything into place based off a child's programming, whatever program they're enrolled in, um, and then also child specific. Those are the
Okay.
two
Okay.
most obvious and should be the most automated uh, sort of filters of communication. So it's nice if you have a system
Yeah.
that just takes care of that like that, because that's like 80 to 90% of communication management is by way of a child's programming that they're enrolled in, or just specific to the parents or guardians of any particular child.
Okay. Okay. So we're about to wrap up just in terms of time. What should be our kind of like our big takeaway as we come away with this? You shared a lot of great information for us.
So I would say, number one, do your best not to push parents away and train them um, not to ignore you by just you know like, first and foremost, like, stop the everything to everybody weekly newsletters. Like, that's just a practice that goes, that's one of those uh, common mistakes I see across the entire industry.
Hmm.
Second of all, maybe I should reverse that. First should be selecting the right families. I think, so retention goes. I think there's one other thing above that. Have a great school, right? Like,
Sure.
have a great school.
Okay.
That's going to be number one, way to improve retention, right? Don't
Yeah.
have any big issues. Have a great school, wonderful educators and staff that makes parents happy with the end result, which is, like the outcomes of their child. Second of all is select, be very selective. Put yourself in a position to be very selective, getting the right families in the door at the very beginning so that you make sure that you've got a good marketing system so that you can fill up your program with families that really have the same values and are looking for the outcomes that your school produces, because that's different from school to school.
Yeah.
Some of these things can be subtle and nuanced, but some things are actually not so subtle and nuanced, right?
Yeah.
In regards to education philosophy and outcomes. So there's a values and a cultural fit too. And then just try not to, I would say you're better off not communicating with parents than, there are things that have to be communicated, but you're better off doing less.
Okay.
Because if you do less, then if you don't have a system that automates and filters information out automatically to the right parents and stuff like that, so that they're only getting 100% relevant information. If you don't have a system that does that, then do less, because you're worse off by, training them to ignore you with poor communication behaviors or practices, than doing less but putting the time in manually to make sure that communication is filtered the right way. Because if you don't have a system, it's going to take more time to accomplish that. But so you do less, but you'll be better off. The parents will be happier. They'll be informed. You'll have to do less repetitive work and chasing around to get information and receive information. So that actually will make things even more efficient. Even if you're doing it manually, but you would have to cut down, because it's really easy for schools to just get completely bogged down by, by communications.
For sure. Okay. John, this was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, I can talk about this for hours. So thank you for allowing me.
Awesome.
And I hope everyone's enjoying the wonderful view of Lake Washington behind me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm not in my hometown of Toronto. I'm visiting family in Mercer Island, and it's wonderful.
Beautiful. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks, man. We'll see you soon.
Okay. See you soon.
All right, folks. There you have it. That wraps up my conversation with John O'Landon. He shared a ton of valuable insights and advice today on how improved communication can boost school retention rates. We also shared some tools and resources, which will all be linked up in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Please consider subscribing, sharing with a friend, or leaving us a review in your favorite podcast directory. Until next time, best of luck in all that you do, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the School Growth Strategies podcast.